I have ridden for Ruck Selden for 19 years, which is long enough to know when he is about to do something that will surprise me, and long enough to have stopped being surprised very often. The winter of 1877 was an exception to that last part. My name is Dex Crow. I was trail foreman on the Selden Range in the Gravel Pass country of Wyoming Territory from 1869 until the year Ruck sold the upper pastures and retired to a smaller operation, which is a story for another time. The story I am telling now concerns a November storm, a widow's door, a loaf of bread, and the particular way that a small thing done without thinking can come back to a person so large they barely recognize it. I will start with Ruck because everything starts with Ruck, whether he intends it or not. Ruck Selden at 48 was not a comfortable man to know. He was large and weathered and direct in the manner of someone who has spent enough time making hard decisions that pleasantries have come to seem like a waste of air. He ran 600 head on the Selden Range and another 300 on the summer pasture above Gravel Pass, and he ran them well. The operation was tight and profitable, and the riders who worked for him were loyal not because Ruck was warm but because he was fair, which is a rarer quality and a more durable one. He paid what he owed, he said what he meant, and he expected the same in return. He had been a widower for 11 years. He did not speak of his wife. He did not need to. The gap she left was visible in the way that absences are always visible to people who know where to look, and I had worked for him long enough to know where to look. The dispute that sent him off the range in November of 1877 was with a man named Greele, who held the eastern water rights and had decided to make them inconvenient. I will not go into the details of that dispute because they are long and complicated and legal and only tangentially related to what I am telling you. What matters is this. Ruck rode out from the Selden Range headquarters on a Tuesday morning to meet with the county recorder about the water filing, alone, because he did not want company, which was a regular preference of his that I had stopped arguing about. He did not tell me which road he planned to take back. The storm came in from the north on Tuesday evening, which I knew and he apparently did not, having been occupied with the county recorder and his own thoughts. By the time Ruck was on the mountain road above Gravel Pass, the snow was coming down heavy enough that a man could miss a turn he had taken 20 times before, which Ruck did. He ended up on the 10-mile track instead of the pass road, which would have been correctable in clear weather and was not correctable in a November blizzard. He rode until the horse needed stopping, and then he looked for shelter and found a light. The light was Clementine Howard's lamp in her kitchen window. I am telling you what I know of that night, which is partly what Ruck told me later and partly what Clem told me herself in the months after, and the two accounts agree in all the important particulars, which speaks well of both of them. Ruck knocked on her door at somewhere past 9 in the evening, half frozen, the horse in worse shape than the man. Clem Howard opened the door with a lamp in one hand and the particular expression of a woman who has been alone on a mountain claim for 2 winters and has learned to assess situations quickly and without panic. She saw a large man in a snow-covered coat, shaking with cold, with a horse behind him that needed the barn immediately. "Barn's around the back," she said. "Get the horse in first." He did. She followed with the lamp and helped him get the animal settled, hay, water, a blanket from the hook on the wall. Clem Howard's barn was small but organized, which told Ruck something about the woman before she'd said another word. When the horse was sorted, she led him inside. The house was one room with a loft, a good stove going, a table, 2 chairs, a shelf of stores that Ruck could see at a glance was not extensive. She sat him by the stove and put a pot on and did not ask questions until his color came back, which was the right order of operations. When he could speak without his teeth chattering, she said, "Where were you headed?" "Selden Range headquarters," he said. "Took the wrong fork above the pass." "Easy to do in this," she said. "The fork's not well marked." "No," he said, "it isn't." She set a bowl in front of him, soup, thin but hot, with the heel of a loaf of bread beside it. He ate. She sat across from him with her own cup and watched him with the level, unsentimental attention of someone who takes in the world plainly and wastes no energy on performance. "You work for Selden," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Something like that," he said. She accepted this. She was not a woman who pushed at things people were not offering. When he had eaten, he said, "I'll pay you for the meal and the barn." "You won't," she said. "Sit by the fire, the storm'll let up by morning." He sat. She went to the loft. In the morning the storm had indeed let up, and she came down and made coffee and cut the last of the bread and set half of it in front of him. "You don't have much," he said. "I have enough," she said. "Town's 3 days. When the pass clears, I'll manage." He looked at her, he looked at the shelf, he looked at her again. She met his gaze with the complete equanimity of a woman who is not going to be discussed. He ate the bread, he drank the coffee, he saddled his horse, which she had already fed from a supply of oats she could not easily spare, and he rode out. At the gate of the yard he stopped and turned back. "Thank you," he said. "Safe ride," she said. He rode down the mountain. He came back to the Selden Range headquarters on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 days after he'd left, and I was in the yard when he rode in. I looked at him the way you look at a man you've known 19 years when something has shifted in his face without his knowing it. "Storm catch you," I said. "Above the pass," he said. "Took the 10-mile fork by mistake." "Who put you up?" He unsaddled his horse. "Homesteader on the 10-mile, widow." I waited. He did not add anything. He led the horse to the barn and I followed. "She all right up there?" I said. "Claim's tight," he said. "Small, she's running it alone." He hung the bridle. "Stores are low." "She feed you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Last of her bread," he said. I let that sit. Ruck Selden was not a man who was given things without a price, and it was not that he was unkind. He would give as readily as anyone in the right situation. It was that the mountain country in which we operated ran on clear exchange, and a woman sharing the last of her bread with a stranger in a storm was a thing outside of that accounting. It didn't fit the ledger he understood. I could see him working it. "You know who she is," I said. "Hauer," he said. "She didn't give me a first name." "Clem Hauer," I said. "Her husband took the 10-mile claim in '74. Died the second winter horse fell on a bad crossing. She's kept it since." Ruck looked at me. "2 winters alone," I said. "Third coming." He went out of the barn. I let him go. Through December and into January, Ruck Selden was not precisely himself. I have described him to you as a man direct and fair and not notably warm. He was all of those things. He was also, in the particular way of self-sufficient men, accustomed to the architecture of his own life being settled, the range, the riders, the work, the order of things. When something did not fit the architecture, it sat with him quietly until he figured out where it went. Clem Hauer did not fit the architecture, and he was figuring out where she went. He mentioned her twice in December, both times in the context of the 10-mile road, which was not a road we had much cause to discuss. Once he asked whether I knew the state of her wood supply. He'd seen the woodpile from the gate and thought it short for a mountain winter. I said I didn't know but could find out. He said don't bother. He said it in a way that meant he was going to think about whether to bother himself. In January he sent 2 of the riders with a cord of wood and a supply box, flour, salt pork, dried beans, a tin of coffee, up the 10-mile road. He gave them no message and no name. He told them to leave it at the barn door and come back. They came back and reported that the woman had come out while they were unloading and asked whose it was, and they'd said they couldn't say, boss's orders, and she'd stood there a moment, and then said to tell whoever it was that she accepted it this once and intended to pay it back. I reported this to Ruck. He made a sound that I could not classify. "She's not going to take charity," I said. It's not charity, he said. He stopped. Return on an investment, I offered. He gave me a look. It's courtesy, he said. I said. He went back to the accounts. February on the Selden Range is an interior month. The cattle are on the winter pasture, the riders are doing maintenance and waiting, and the ranch house is a place where a man spends more time with his own thoughts than is necessarily advisable. Ruck spent February being unusually focused on the accounts and unusually interested in the Gravel Pass country, about which he asked me several questions he already knew the answers to. I answered them straight because that is how I operated with him and how he expected me to operate. He asked about the 10-mile claims in general, how many, who held them, what the typical acreage and water situation was. I told him. He asked about the Hauer claim specifically, the acreage Clem held, the water rights, whether the cabin structure was sound. I told him what I knew, which was not everything, and said if he wanted more specifics he would need to look himself. He did not say anything for a moment. She has good instincts, he said. The barn was well organized. She came from farming stock, I said, before she married Hauer. Where from? Ohio, I think. He nodded. He went back to the accounts. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, you could ride up and see how she's managing. I had worked for Ruck long enough to know that he would arrive at the things he needed to arrive at in his own time, and pushing made him go slower, not faster. The man was like a river that went where it was going and cut its own channel, and the most you could do was observe the direction. The direction was uphill toward the 10-mile, and he'd get there when he got there. In March, the pass cleared enough to travel, and I organized the spring supply run to the upper pasture. It was a regular thing. We sent riders up with supplies for the line camp and checked the state of the fence and the water on the high ground. I added the 10-mile road to the route, which Ruck did not comment on. I rode up with 3 others. The Hauer claim was on the east side of the 10-mile, set back from the road maybe 200 yards with a clear view of the valley below. The cabin was as Ruck had described, small, solid, well kept in the way of places that have been maintained by someone who takes the long view. The barn was in good repair. The woodpile, I noticed, had been replenished, not by us, which meant she'd done it herself through the winter. She came out when she heard the horses. I had not met Clem Hauer before that day. I had heard of her in the way you hear of people in a close mountain country, by reference and reputation. What I had heard was that she was capable and private, and did not ask for help, and did not turn it away when offered with respect. The woman who walked out of that cabin in March was 36 years old, on the thin side from a hard winter, but otherwise moving with the particular economical purpose of someone who has a list of things to do and means to do them. She looked at us the way Ruck had described her looking at him, plainly, without performance cataloging. Crow, she said, which surprised me. You know who I am, I said. Selden Range foreman, she said. You've been to the store in Gravel Pass. People talk. She looked at the others. You're not here about the fence line. No, ma'am, I said. Boss wanted to know how the claim was holding. She stood for a moment with her arms at her sides, and I watched her work through something, the particular exercise of a self-reliant person, deciding how much of their situation to reveal and to whom. Holding, she said. The roof wants a second pair of hands in 2 places. I've been managing with what I have. We can take a look, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then I'll make coffee. She made coffee and we looked at the roof, which wanted more than 2 places but not catastrophically so. 2 of the riders shingled the worst spots while she and I sat on the step with our cups and talked about the 10-mile country and the state of the spring and the pass road. She was direct. She had a way of asking things that stripped the unnecessary out of a question and left only what she actually wanted to know. I found I liked talking to her, which is not something I say easily about many people. The supply box in January, she said, toward the end of the second cup. That was Selden. Can't say, I said. Can't or won't? Both, I said. She looked at me. Something moved in her expression, not softened exactly, but reconsidering. I'll pay it back, she said. He knows, I said. He's not expecting you to. I am, she said. I believed her. We rode back to the Selden Range that evening. I reported to Ruck, roof patched, claim holding, woman managing. I told him she'd identified the supply box as his. He was quiet. She said she'll pay it back, I said. She doesn't owe anything, he said. She thinks she does, I said. That's not nothing with someone like her. He looked at me. She's proud, I said. Not the foolish kind, the kind that keeps a person upright through bad winters. I know, he said. So if you're going to do anything, I said, it's going to have to be something she can receive without it being a gift. Something that looks like an exchange. He thought about that for a long time that evening. I left him to it and went to bed. April. Ruck came to me on a Monday morning and said he'd been thinking about the 10-mile claims in general and the Hauer claim in particular, and that the cabin needed a proper second room if the place was going to be a real operation, and that the fence line on the east side wanted 4 new posts and new wire, and that the water situation could be improved if someone ran a pipe from the upper spring, which he had noticed was positioned right for it. I listened to all of this. You want to send riders, I said. I want to offer labor, he said, against future consideration. Future consideration, I said. She runs good stock, he said. From what I could see in the barn, the horse she's keeping is quality if she's going to expand the claim. She hasn't said she's expanding, I said. She should, he said. The land supports it. She has water rights on the upper spring that she's not using. I thought about this. You looked into her water rights. I looked into the 10-mile water situation generally, he said, which was true in the most technical sense and also not entirely the point. Ruck, I said. What? You want to go up there, I said. You want to go yourself and see how she is, and you've been making reasons not to for 5 months. He looked at me for a long moment with the expression he used when I said something accurate that he hadn't given me permission to say. The riders can go this week, I said. Start on the fence and the pipe. You can go up Saturday with the lumber order. I'll go up with the riders, he said. No, I said. You'll go Saturday with the lumber order by yourself. He looked at me again. You're my foreman, he said, not my mother. Correct on both counts, I said. Saturday. He went back inside. On Saturday he loaded the lumber himself and drove up the 10-mile road alone, which was what I had intended, and which he knew I had intended, and which he did anyway, which told me everything I needed to know about where this was going. I heard what happened on that Saturday from Ruck and from Clem later, and the accounts are consistent. He pulled up to the Hauer claim at mid-morning. The riders were already there, 2 of them working the fence line, 1 running the pipe from the upper spring. Clem was on the roof of the cabin with a hammer, doing the additional shingling herself because she had identified 2 more places that wanted attention since my visit in March. Ruck got off the wagon and looked up at the roof. You should have waited, he said. There's a man who can do that. I've been doing my own roof for 3 years, she said without stopping. There's a better way to nail that, he said. She stopped and looked down at him. He looked back up at her. You're Selden, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him for a moment with the cataloging attention I had seen her use on everything, and I imagined the experience of being looked at that way for the first time was something he was not entirely prepared for. Come up, she said. I'll show you what I'm trying to do, and you can tell me if you've got a better way. He went up. They worked the roof together for 2 hours, which is, in my experience, a better way to understand a person than almost any other activity. Roofwork requires communication and trust and a clear division of labor, and you learn quickly whether the person beside you knows what they're doing and whether they're willing to say when they don't. Ruck told me later that she knew what she was doing on a roof. Clem told me later that he had a better nail pattern, and she had taken it without ceremony, which she said was the mark of someone who actually knew his trade rather than just thought he did. At noon she made food, not coffee this time, a proper meal from a larder that was, thanks to January, less bare than it had been in November. They ate at the table. The riders came in for their portion and went back out, which gave Ruck and Clem the room to themselves. I do not know what they said in that hour. Neither of them told me in detail, which is how I know it mattered. People recount the inconsequential fully and hold the consequential close. What I know is that he was there until late afternoon, and that when he left he said he would come back Thursday to check the pipe installation, and she said that was fine. He came back Thursday. And the Thursday after. May. I rode up the 10-mile myself in the second week of May to see how the fence and pipe work had come out, which was a legitimate purpose, and also my genuine curiosity about the state of affairs. The pipe was well run, delivering water from the upper spring to a trough beside the barn with enough pressure to be useful and enough volume to matter. The fence line on the east side was tight and straight. The cabin had its second room framed, not finished but framed, which meant the work had proceeded faster than I expected. Clem Hauer was in the kitchen garden when I rode up. It was a small garden but well laid, the kind of planting that tells you the person doing it has thought about succession and yield, and is not just putting seeds in the ground and hoping. "Crow," she said. "Ma'am," I said, "how's it holding?" "Better," she said. She stood and looked at me with the level attention I had come to expect. "You sent him up here." "I suggested a Saturday," I said. "Man makes his own decisions." "He's been here 4 times," she said. "Has he?" I said, in the tone of a man who is not surprised. She looked at me for a moment. Something was working in her expression, not the sorting out look, something more interior than that. "He doesn't say much," she said. "No," I said. "But what he says he means." "Always," I said. She looked at the garden. "I've been alone on this claim for 3 years," she said. "I built what I built by knowing what I needed and not expecting anyone to provide it." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "That's not going to change because someone fixed my fence," she said. "No," I said, "I don't imagine it is." She was quiet for a moment. "He knows that." It was not a question. She had assessed him and reached a conclusion, which was that Ruck Selden was a man who understood the nature of what he was dealing with. "He knows that," I confirmed. She went back to her planting. I checked the pipe and the fence and rode back down, and I thought about the particular quality of 2 people who have both been alone long enough to know their own minds meeting across a table and finding, without expecting to, that the other person makes sense. June. Ruck came to me on a Tuesday morning and sat down at the kitchen table in the ranch house headquarters with his coffee, and was quiet for longer than usual, which with Ruck Selden meant something was working itself out. I waited. "I'm going to ask her something," he said at last. "All right," I said. "She may say no," he said. "She might," I said. "She has every right to say no," he said. "She does," I said. He drank his coffee. "The claim is going to need a south pasture extension if she's serious about running more stock," he said. "The 10-mile grants a preemption right on the adjacent parcel, which she hasn't filed. The window for that filing is September." "You looked into that," I said. "The 10-mile land records are public," he said, which was true and not the point. "Ruck," I said. "What? What is it you're actually asking her?" He looked at his coffee. He was not a man who struggled with words generally. He said what he meant and stopped, but he was struggling now, which was the most eloquent thing I had seen him do in 19 years. "I'm going to ask her," he said carefully, "whether she would consider making the claim into something larger. Whether she would want company in that." "Company," I said. He stopped. "I'm asking her to marry me," he said, in the tone of a man who has decided that plain language is the only language and he has been putting it off long enough. I sat with that for a moment. "Good," I said. He looked at me. "I don't know what you'll say." "No," I said, "you don't. You're going to have to go up there and find out." "I'm aware," he said. "What did you tell her the last time?" I said. He was quiet. "I told her the south pasture extension would support 15 more head if the grass held, and I told her the second room was going to need finishing before the fall." "That's what you told her," I said. "Yes." "And she said?" "She said the grass would probably hold," he said, "and that she'd been thinking about the room and had an idea about the window placement." I looked at him, he looked at me. "She's been thinking about the room," I said. "The window placement," he said. "That's not a woman who's planning to tell you no," I said. He stood up and put his hat on. "I'll go Thursday," he said. "Go today," I said. He looked at me with the expression he used when I was right, and rather I hadn't said it. He went today. I did not go with him. I stayed at the ranch and did the things a foreman does when the boss is off the range for a day, which are numerous and unremarkable, and which I did with the efficient distraction of a man who is thinking about something else. He came back in the late afternoon. I was at the corral when he rode in. I looked at him, he looked at me. "Well," I said. He got off his horse. "She said yes," he said, "but she wants it understood that the Hauer claim keeps its name and she keeps the filing separate." "Sensible," I said. "She said she's not interested in being absorbed into the Selden operation," he said. "She said the two claims can work together, but they work as two claims." "Also sensible," I said. "She also said," he continued, and something shifted in his voice that I had not heard before, something that was not quite warmth exactly, but was in the neighborhood of it, that she had been thinking since March about what kind of man sends a supply box in a storm with no name on it, and that she had come to a conclusion about it, and the conclusion was favorable. I looked at him. He looked at the corral fence. "She said that," I said. "More or less," he said. "Favorable," I said. "That was the word," he said. I thought about a November storm and a lamp in a window and a woman who shared the last of her bread with a stranger who didn't give his name. I thought about 5 months of a man finding reasons to look at Tenma water records and roof nail patterns, and the particular look on his face, the first Thursday he came back from the claim with nothing useful to report, and a quality in his eyes I hadn't seen in 11 years. "You're going to have to fix the window placement the way she wants it," I said. "I know," he said. "And the south pasture extension." "Filed in September," he said. "She's already worked out the acreage." I shook my head. I was smiling, which is a thing I do not do excessively. "You rode up there to ask her something," I said, "and she'd already filed the plans." "She had an idea about it in March," he said. "She didn't say anything because she wasn't sure I'd be back. And once she was sure, she filed the plans," he said. I thought about that, a woman alone on a mountain claim who has learned not to expect anything, and who, quietly and without announcement, began planning for a future she was not yet certain of, because the evidence was pointing that direction and she was a person who followed evidence. "That's the most efficient courtship I've heard of," I said. "She's an efficient woman," he said, and there was something in the way he said it that told me this was not a complaint. They were married in September, which is the best month in the Gravel Pass country. The aspens going gold on the ridges, the air clean and cool, the summer work done, and the winter not yet arrived. The ceremony was at the Hauer cabin, which had its second room finished by then with the windows placed as Clem had wanted them, which let in the morning light in a way that was, I have to say, better than anything Ruck would have done on his own. The preacher came up from Gravel Pass, and a dozen people came from the valley and from the neighboring claims, and Clem's two neighbors on the 10 mile, the Marin family and old Pete Sutter, stood up with them. Ruck Selden at a wedding was not a natural creature. He stood at the front of the room with the particular stillness of a man who has been uncomfortable in formal situations his entire life, and is managing it through sheer force of will. The preacher said what needed saying. Ruck said what was required of him in a voice that was quieter than his normal register, which I found unexpectedly affecting. Clem said what was required of her with her eyes on his, which was simply her way. She looked at things directly, and this was no different, except that what she was looking at was a man she had decided to trust, and the looking was therefore weightier than most. After, I stood on the cabin step with a cup, and watched the valley below the 10 mile turn gold in the September light, and I thought about an accounting I had been keeping in my head since March. A widow in a storm shares her last bread with a stranger. That is the first entry. The stranger sends a supply box with no name. Second entry. Riders come in the spring, the fence goes up, the pipe runs, the roof gets shingled a second time better. Third, fourth, fifth entries. A man drives a lumber wagon up a mountain road on a Saturday morning and comes back Thursday, and the Thursday after, and the Thursday after that. A woman plans a window placement in March for a room that isn't being built yet, and an extension for a pasture that hasn't been discussed, because she is a person who follows evidence and the evidence is pointing somewhere. Sixth, seventh, eighth entries. I have been a foreman for 19 years. I understand accounting. A ledger has to balance. What goes out has to come back in equivalent measure, or the operation does not sustain itself. What I have never entirely understood, until I stood on that step with my cup, is that some exchanges do not balance in the expected direction. She gave first. She gave without knowing who he was or what she would get back. She gave because it was the right thing, and she did not keep a separate accounting for right things. They went into the same column as breathing and waking up and getting the work done. What came back was more than bread. What came back was a fence and a pipe and a room and a south pasture, and in the end, a man who knew what he owed and came himself to pay it, and discovered in the paying that what he owed was not the debt he thought it was. I drank my coffee on the step of the Hauer cabin in September of 1877, and listened to the sounds of a small celebration inside Ruck's voice, for once, not clipped and minimal but at ease, the way I had not heard it since before he lost his wife, and the aspens went gold on the ridge above the 10 mile, and I thought, here is what a small kindness looks like when it comes back. It looks like this. It looks like a lit window and a warm room, and a woman who planned for a future she didn't know was coming, and a man who found his way back to something he'd thought was finished. I will tell you the one last thing, because it is what I remember best. 6 months after the wedding, in the spring of 1878, I rode up the 10 mile to look at the South Pasture extension, which had been filed and recorded in September, and was now being put to use. 15 head of Clem's stock were running on it, and they were good stock. She had an eye for cattle that I had not expected, and that Ruck had known about since he'd looked at her barn in November and seen the horse she kept. She was in the kitchen garden when I rode up, same as the spring before. The second room had its curtains in by then and a lamp on the sill, and the barn had been extended slightly on the west end to hold more animals. The woodpile was substantial, built by 2 people rather than 1, and the 10 mile claim had the look of a place that has been properly attended to. She came to the gate when she saw me. "Crow," she said. "Ma'am," I said, "how's it holding?" She looked at the pasture. She looked at the cabin. She looked at the valley below with the Selden Range visible in the distance, running to the south. "Better," she said. It was what she'd said the year before, but it meant something different this time, and we both knew it. "He's riding the North Line this week," I said. "Says he'll be up Thursday." "I know," she said. "He said." She went back to her garden. I checked the pasture and the pipe and the fence and rode back down the mountain. And the spring grass was coming in green on the Selden Range below, and the aspens were just starting on the ridge above the Tenmo. And a loaf of bread that had been given in November of 1877 was still coming back in ways that neither the woman who gave it nor the man who received it had been able to predict. That is the whole of the accounting, and it balances. It more than balances.